Your avoidant ex just texted you. Here's exactly how to respond. So, your phone lights up. It's them. The avoidant ex. The one who ran hot and cold. The one who left you feeling like you were always one step away from being enough. And now they've texted you. What do? First, pause. Breathe. This is not an emergency. This is not a rescue mission. This is a test of your standards. When an avoidant ex texts you, it's rarely because they've had a sudden epiphany about how amazing you are and how ready they are to do the work. Most often, it's because they're lonely, curious, or craving a hit of validation. Maybe they miss the comfort you gave them without being ready to give it back. But you've grown, you've been healing, you've been building a version of yourself that doesn't settle for breadcrumbs. So how do you respond? You respond from power, not panic. From clarity, not confusion. When your avoidant ex texts you, your immediate reaction might be to grab your phone, craft the perfect response, or even feel a jolt of excitement. It's natural. This is someone you had feelings for, someone who once held a place in your heart. But this is the exact moment where your strength is tested. Before you do anything, the most important thing you can do is pause. Not for a few seconds, pause long enough to remove emotion from the driver's seat and let clarity take over. Because this is not just a text, it's a trigger for hope, confusion, longing, and sometimes even self-doubt. When someone who distanced themselves emotionally reaches out again, your body remembers the emotional roller coaster, the highs, the lows, the waiting, the second guessing. Your brain might want to interpret their message as a sign they've changed, but pausing gives you the ability to observe your own reaction instead of acting from it. Are you feeling excited, anxious, defensive, hopeful? All of those are valid, but none of them should dictate your next move. When you pause, you give yourself a chance to shift from reacting to reflecting. That reflection allows you to ask, what does this message actually mean? Not what you want it to mean, but what it objectively is. Is it a vague, hey, how have you been? With no real intention behind it? Is it late at night? Is it during a moment they're likely bored, lonely, or in need of attention? The pause gives you space to see the message for what it is, often just a breadcrumb designed to pull you back into a dynamic you've worked hard to move beyond. The pause also reminds you of who you are now. You're not the version of yourself that once tolerated the inconsistency. You've done some growing. Maybe you've started to rebuild your self-worth, or maybe you've just started to understand what healthy love is supposed to feel like. Jumping into a response too quickly can override all of that. But waiting, even if only for an hour a day, creates emotional distance. And in that space, you reclaim your power. So when your ex texts you, don't ask, what should I say? Ask first, why do I feel like I need to respond right now? The pause is where self-respect has room to speak louder than impulse. When your avoidant ex reaches out, it's easy to jump straight into thinking about what you want to say or how to make things right again. But before you respond, one of the most important questions you can ask yourself is, do I actually want them back? Or am I just missing the feeling of not being alone? This might seem simple, but it's a question that cuts deep into your emotional truth. Sometimes what we miss isn't the person themselves, but the comfort their presence once gave us, a sense of familiarity, even if it wasn't always healthy. It's natural to crave connection, especially when someone who was a big part of your life suddenly reappears. But there's a huge difference between wanting someone and wanting this someone, with all their history and behaviors included. When you stop to ask whether you want them back or just want to feel less lonely, you give yourself the opportunity to untangle your emotion. Loneliness can make us vulnerable, and vulnerability can blur the lines between what we truly need and what feels temporarily soothing. Sometimes the fear of being alone can trick us into thinking that a text from an avoidant ex is a sign of something meaningful. But it's important to recognize that avoiding loneliness isn't the same as wanting to build a healthy, fulfilling relationship with that person. The feeling of missing companionship is universal, but chasing that feeling by reconnecting with someone who didn't fully commit before can set you up for the same cycle of disappointment. When you pause to examine your motives, you give yourself the chance to be honest about what you really want. Are you craving emotional security, or are you longing for validation that this person still thinks about you? Are you hoping they've changed, or are you just afraid of starting over? These questions help you look beyond the initial emotional rush and focus on what's actually best for you in the long run. If you realize you're missing the idea of them more than the person themselves, it's a clear signal to proceed with caution, or not at all. Missing the idea often means you're holding on to a fantasy rather than a reality. And when it comes to avoidant partners, the reality is usually far more complicated than the fantasy. By acknowledging this distinction, you're protecting your emotional well-being and setting yourself up for healthier connections in the future. Ultimately, this kind of honest self-reflection helps you reclaim your power. Instead of reacting out of loneliness or fear, you respond from a place of self-awareness and clarity. It's a crucial step in breaking free from old patterns and moving forward with intention. When it comes to responding to an avoidant ex, one of the most important things to remember is that you need to respond with boundaries. This means keeping your reply short, neutral, and emotionally controlled, rather than diving into a long message filled with explanations, feelings, or attempts to rekindle what once was. Avoidant individuals tend to pull away when things get too intense or demanding, so flooding them with emotion or trying to chase after answers only pushes them further. Boundaries aren't just about protecting yourself. They're a way to communicate clearly what you're willing to engage with and what you're not. Responding with boundaries starts with a mindset shift. Instead of feeling like you have to explain yourself or justify your feelings, understand that you are choosing whether or not to engage at all, and if you do, you're setting the tone. When your message is concise and neutral, it doesn't invite drama or emotional escalation. It gives the avoidant ex space to come forward if they want to without pressure or judgment. For example, a simple, "Hey, I got your message, how are you?" is enough. It's polite but doesn't reveal too much. You're showing you acknowledge their attempt to reach out without giving away your emotional state or making yourself vulnerable right away. This approach also allows you to observe how they respond. Are they consistent? Do they follow through? Or do they disappear again after a brief contact? By holding your boundaries, you avoid getting caught up in the endless cycle of hot and cold that often characterizes avoidant dynamics. This cycle can be exhausting and damaging, but when you keep your responses measured, you remain in control of your own emotional well-being. It's also important not to chase the conversation if they're slow to respond or give vague answers. Avoidants often struggle with intimacy and commitment, so pushing too hard can trigger them to pull away even more. Instead, by responding with boundaries, you protect yourself from over-investing emotionally and give them the opportunity to show up differently if they can. Boundaries are not about punishing or shutting someone out. They're about respecting yourself enough to only engage on terms that feel safe and manageable. They create a buffer that keeps you from spiraling into confusion or hurt when the avoidant behavior inevitably appears. If you find yourself wanting to say more or explain more, remember that sometimes less is more. A calm, neutral, boundary-respecting reply sends a powerful message. You're open, but you're not desperate. This stance shifts the dynamic entirely. Instead of you chasing and trying to fix things, you're allowing the other person to step up if they truly want to. And if they don't, you've preserved your dignity and your peace of mind. When your avoidant ex reaches out and you decide to respond, it's important to shift your mindset from trying to win them back to simply observing whether they've actually changed. Too often, we fall into the trap of believing that a text or a message means something deeper, that it signals a genuine desire to reconnect in a healthy way. But avoidant individuals typically struggle with intimacy and commitment, and their words don't always match their actions. So rather than investing energy into convincing them to stay or reopening old wounds with emotional appeals, you want to watch closely to see if their behavior reflects a real transformation. Change in someone who has been avoidant isn't about grand declarations or promises made in a message. It's about consistency and effort over time. Avoidants often reach out when it's convenient or when they feel lonely, but sustaining a healthy connection means showing up regularly and following through on commitments. Watching how they behave after that initial text is where the truth lies. Do they initiate conversations without being prompted? Do they respond thoughtfully and respectfully? Are they willing to engage in honest conversations about what went wrong before and how to move forward? These are the signals that indicate whether they're ready to step into a more emotionally available role. It's also essential to pay attention to how they handle boundaries. An avoidant who truly wants to change will respect your limits and won't try to pressure you into quick reunions or emotional deep dives before you're ready. They'll understand that rebuilding trust and connection is a gradual process. If instead they push aggressively or pull away again after a brief moment of engagement, it's a clear sign that nothing has really shifted beneath the surface. The key is to let them lead without losing your own footing. You're not chasing or pleading for their attention. You're giving them space to demonstrate growth while protecting your emotional well-being. This means you don't have to respond immediately or at all if their behavior doesn't inspire confidence. You watch, you listen, you evaluate, because words alone don't rebuild bridges, actions do. When you come from this perspective, you reclaim control of your emotional energy. You're no longer desperate to fix what was broken. Instead, you're open to what's possible, but only if it's genuine and healthy. And that kind of clarity protects you from falling back into old patterns that left you hurt and confused before. Watching rather than wooing is the most powerful way to know whether this time is truly different. Silence can be one of the most powerful responses when your avoidant ex texts you. It might feel counterintuitive at first because we're often conditioned to believe that communication equals progress and that ignoring someone means missing an opportunity or appearing weak. But in the context of someone who has been avoidant, who has withdrawn emotionally or physically without explanation, silence can send a clear message without saying a word. It shows that you're no longer willing to engage on their terms or accept half-hearted efforts. Choosing not to respond isn't about punishment or playing games. It's about respecting your own emotional boundaries and recognizing when the dynamic isn't healthy. When someone repeatedly pulls away or shows inconsistency, responding to every message keeps you trapped in a cycle of hope and disappointment. Silence breaks that cycle by creating space for both of you. For you, it means space to heal, reflect, and regain your strength. For them, it means space to realize what they might be missing, or to accept that you're no longer available to be an emotional safety net without reciprocity. Silence also protects your energy. Every time you respond to an avoidant ex who reaches out sporadically, you risk opening old wounds and inviting confusion. You risk reactivating feelings of insecurity or longing that you might have worked hard to move past. By not replying, you maintain control over your emotional landscape instead of handing it over to someone whose behavior has been unpredictable. It's a way of prioritizing your well-being over the desire to explain, defend, or justify your feelings. Another important aspect of silence is that it forces a kind of accountability. When you step back and don't respond, you're signaling that you're not available for a casual or one-sided connection. It puts the ball in their court to show whether they're serious about rebuilding or if they're just seeking temporary comfort. Often, avoidant partners rely on their targets to chase and reassure them, but silence disrupts that dynamic and makes them face the consequences of their inconsistency. It's important to remember that silence doesn't have to be permanent, but it should be purposeful. It's not about shutting the door forever, but about giving yourself permission to step away until you see genuine change or clarity. And if after a period of silence, they don't make a meaningful effort or continue to be avoidant, then silence becomes the healthiest choice you can make. Ultimately, silence is a form of self-respect. It's a boundary that protects your heart and mind from being caught in emotional turmoil. In situations where words have failed and actions have disappointed, silence speaks volumes. At the end of the day, when your avoidant ex texts you, remember that your response is about honoring your growth and your worth. It's about choosing clarity over confusion, strength over desperation, and self-respect over old patterns. Whether you decide to respond or not, do so from a place of power, not panic. You deserve relationships where love is consistent, where effort is mutual, and where you feel truly seen and valued. Thank you for trusting me to share this with you today. I hope this gives you the confidence and clarity you need when faced with those tricky moments. Remember, your time, energy, and heart are precious. Protect them fiercely. Take care of yourself, stay strong, and keep moving forward. Until next time, be well and keep shining your light.